Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I'm going to read you a poem in a moment. But I thought I would actually share with you a little bit about Windows. I just had my computer turn itself off, and it's doing it a lot lately. I have no idea why. But as a result of that, there are algorithms in Windows that seek to maintain the software. I was told by a guy from Telstra some months ago that someone was hacking into uh, my computer when I was, working on it. And as a result, I learned about Event Viewer, which I didn't know about before. And I've actually just been looking at it now. But what's interesting about it is even when my computer's unplugged, Event Viewer is recording all these logs. And underneath it, it's got custom views, Windows logs, application security setup, system, forwarded events. And if you go into application, you'll see that there's a level. It might say information, date and time. And it's recording, times where my computer's not plugged in to power. So it's obviously working off the battery. And then it'll have some sort of source label and the number of events. And if I look at the very top, I can see the number of events is 9,463, which seems to me a lot, given I wiped my computer a few months ago. So that's a lot of events in my view. I have no understanding of the program language that I'm looking at because I've not been trained. But what I've realised is because the software is licensed, those companies, corporations, can come onto your computer and actually, respond to changes in the software. And of course, my concern is what I'm doing being recorded on some level. And what I'm concerned about as well is, for example, if it's a smart meter to the house, which there is in this case, this one's United Energy, I don't want to plug my computer in and have that part of a LAN network, so that's a local area network, or they call it local access network. I don't know whether some foreign corporation is able to look at my computer when I plug into energy, because it's intelligent energy now, it's not passive. Makes me very uncomfortable when I want to express myself. The other issue is the NBN. It's a private company that government is getting behind and has created. Well, it was created by Telstra, actually. I actually met the guy who created it myself. I house sat for him. And he tried both political parties, and the Liberal Party were the ones that took it. And I think it's $5 billion they've spent on connecting households to this government. Well, I don't know if it can be called government network if it's a private company. NBN Proprietary Limited is private, and yet we're being told it's compulsory, and I don't know how that can be when it's a private company. And if you're not even on the internet, which we're not here, how is it that we need the NBN? Because we're not getting services. But people have to connect it. And what my concern is again, here I am plugged in. Are they accessing my computer? So looking again at the event viewer, I just want to start this video with a bit of this because the poem is along similar lines. So if I go down and I have a look at some of the information that's been logged, I'll see if I can find something that's interesting. Apparently a search service started at 6:04. It just goes Windows search service started. And then we've got logging recovery. That was when my computer went down. And then I kind of wonder, is anything being kept as a shadow that I'm working on? How can I be sure I am actually getting the privacy that I want? I have actually started to turn off all the apps, and I've even started deleting apps because I don't want companies taking any of my information, and I certainly don't want it being sold because I don't know what the future implications are of that. If I'm having freedom of speech and someone doesn't like what I'm saying, and then an implication happens to me later on, I can't protect myself. If I haven't put it out there publicly, but it's been gathered privately by private companies and then sold on to either other companies or it's given to government, I don't know. We just don't know. The world we're in today is getting very confusing because we're not quite sure what's going on, and people are feeling really uncomfortable, particularly when they see legislation changing, when they realise that, governments can access their phones. My friend just told me the other day that there was an announcement that everyone's phone is being tracked. And I have a real issue with that because I've been tracked before and it was a form of stalking, in my view. And as a woman on my own, I felt totally uncomfortable with my location being known, my address being known. And I don't know what sort of problems could come out of that if people decide they don't, if there's a sort of a ramification if you raise issues that are sensitive. People don't like it. And I'm talking people in either corporations or government. So if the government is allowed to, track everyone's phones, it means they can know where you are at any point because people carry their phones with them all the time. I don't agree with that myself. I don't think anyone has the right to invade privacy like that. And I don't care whether it is about traffic. They've got cameras every 50 metres on the lighting. This is the light poles. So why do they need to track everyone's phone? So, that doesn't inspire trust in our government. It actually is quite frightening. I know when I was in Vietnam, and I also went to Russia as well, contemplating, this over-scrutiny of citizens. Certainly in those days, in Russia and places like Vietnam where they were communist-oriented, there was people sort of being very more cautious, as they couldn't say this or that because it could be picked up by what they saw as spies. The public were under intense scrutiny all the time, and if someone was deemed an enemy of the state, they could be just picked up, taken away. So when we see things like this happening in our own society where there's all these cameras everywhere, I walked into a service station and I counted something like 10 to 15 cameras. And then I'm told there's a difference. Some of them are just surveillance cameras, so they're just watching everyone, but there's a lot of them all over the store. And then you've got security cameras that apparently go to some security. I don't even know who it is. We're not even informed who's watching us. We don't know. We don't know if they're private or public. And I don't really want to be watched everywhere I go. I really don't. I love my anonymity. I love to feel when I go for a walk, I'm not going under a camera. And when they've got facial recognition, and certainly I have, expressed myself publicly, I don't want facial recognition to pick up my face and then for me to be suddenly, it goes back to base immediately, real time, and then my whereabouts is known. I don't want that. I certainly don't give permission to it. I've not committed any crime in living in a democracy where we are told the principles we all share as a nation state is freedom of speech, that, we are paying taxes in order for the government to provide services to us, to find that over time it's becoming more and more privatised. So how can I put a freedom of information request to a private company who apparently is delivering what was once a public service? Could be electricity, like these smart meters and NBN. The NBN apparently is replacing copper wires. So if that's a private company and the copper wires are all removed, which was put in as a public infrastructure, what rights does that leave citizens if they have a problem with the NBN? What if they don't want it? We're supposed to be in a free society where we can say yes or no. So I have real concerns around this entire NBN network that's being set up around all of us. The fact that there's smart TVs, smart buses, everything's got smart labelling on it and future-ready labelling on it, I noticed. And I find it all very concerning. They often will talk about disruption. Well, in what way are they disrupting our lives? Is the disruption taking away our privacy? And if it is, I certainly say no to that. I'm not saying yes as a form of compliance, no way. I do not want my personal information known by anybody. If I choose to do videos like I do, and I'm a very open person, that's my choice to do that video. But I don't at all choose for anyone to access my files on my USB. And what I notice with Windows is you put your USB in, and then it says, it sort of advises you to check disk, to check it, that there could be an error on it. There is no error on it. And I don't want them scanning my USB. If I go to Officeworks, which is an American company here in Australia, I don't want them scanning my USB. I don't know where that information goes. Do they put it up on a cloud? Is it private? You know, if I go into McDonald's, another American company, and plug in my computer and use their wireless, does that mean my information's not private? Certainly I'm being filmed in there, and I don't really like that. And I'm sure, you know, when you think a lot of children go in there, I don't think it's a particularly wise idea for children to be surveilled in any way. I have no problem with, to a certain degree, safety. Like, I don't mind if there's, you know, protecting, you know, a building or what have you, if there's some sort of sensitivity around it. But I think there has to be public debate on how far surveillance goes. For those in the business of surveillance, they just see data. For those in the business of information technology, which is computer science, they just see data. For those of us on the other side of all of this, we see an invasion of privacy. Some don't even know. In fact, I'd say most don't know, because they've never really looked through. Certainly Event Viewer on Windows they haven't looked through. If I go and have a look at security here, let's see what comes up. I've got 12,249 events. That means where there has been an algorithm going and it's checking something. For example, whilst I've been sitting here, I've had Microsoft Windows security auditing, and it's got special login, log on. So what does that mean? Let me have a look and I'll share it with you. See if I can understand it. It's got a login ID. I don't know what that means because I've not been informed of what's going on my computer. And it says its log name is security, source is Microsoft Windows Security. It logged today, 7th of the 7th, 2019 at 6:14. It's now 6:20. So this is an algorithm. This is happening in the background. It's saying audit success. Well, what exactly has it audited? It says I can go online. I'm actually not too comfortable doing that. It says that the top special privileges assigned to new logon. Well, I haven't given any permission for a logon, so I don't know what that means. I'm not an IT person, and that's where the disadvantage is. Just having another look at some more information here. See, it says things like privilege list, SE assigned primary token privilege, SE TCB privilege, SE security privilege. I have no idea what that means. SE take ownership privilege. What does that mean? SE load driver privilege, SE backup privilege. What are they backing up? Restore privilege, debug privilege, audit privilege, system environment privilege. This is all going down of a list. Impersonate privilege. What's that? Delegate session user impersonate privilege. And this is all under security. But I don't know what I'm giving permission to here. And they'll say, well, it's our software. Well, maybe so, but I need to know what you're doing on my computer. System integrity is another one they've got here. Microsoft software key storage provider. Don't know what that means. They've even got my computer name and domain. So every computer has its own ID. So wherever you go, they'll know your computer. I don't necessarily want that either. See, I find it all too intrusive, and I'd love to get software that's not licensed, that I actually own, and then I don't have to worry about, others accessing my computer, because I've had Windows support when I've first loaded software, and they have helped me with it, but they came straight on, and I thought, gee, that was easy. They had wireless. Again, with smart meters, I don't know to what extent they're able to access anyway. Have no idea. So I'm just having a quick scan down the list here, because it's 9,000 events. It's a lot. And I don't know what they're accessing. See, there's one here, rich video. I wonder what that is. This description for event ID from source rich video 64 cannot be found. Either the component that raises this event is not installed on your local computer, or the installation is corrupted. You can install or repair the component on the local computer. If the event originated on another computer, see, that suggests a local area network. This display information has to be saved with the event. The following information was included in this event. Server started. So I don't know what this means, and I need to know, as a person whose computer this is running on. Yes, they may well be licensed, or I may be licensed, but they may own it. But I still have a right to know what's going on in language I can understand, so I can okay it or not. I don't like being kept in the dark about things. So I just thought I'd share that with you, because Event Viewer was brought to my attention by Telstra, which is our telecommunications. Well, it was. I don't know even if we own it. I don't think so. Telstra or Telecom was broken up, and private telecommunications or IT specialists came in, telecommunications. So all public data then is accessible by these other companies, and we all use our phones and everything thinking it's private, and they must look at us and think, gee, they reveal a lot. We don't know, because we're not used to the surveillance mindset. I know I keep having to remind myself when I plug in my computer, I'm really not comfortable with it. So that brings me to my poem, which really I wrote some years ago. And funnily enough, I really did tap into what I think is the problem with Future Ready, which is, you'll see Vodafone's promoting Future Ready, the universities promote Future Ready. The United States were the ones that created Future Ready. It's all to do with education and online IT, where everything's logged, all data is gathered. I'm really uneasy about it. So I'm going to read you the poem I wrote, and it's even prior to the knowledge I have today. Surprisingly enough, I seem to have understood back then what we're up against. So I'll read it for you, and you can decide what you think. It's called, Is the World Future Ready? Is the world future ready? A cyber reality or ready for the real world? A smart city or intelligent design? Is humanity losing, or are we losing our humanity? Do we understand the diversity of unity, or the oribus of unity in diversity? Just for those who don't know what oribus is, if you can imagine, it's the snake eating its tail. It's an ancient Egyptian symbol. So I'll read that one again. Do we understand the diversity of unity, or the oribus of unity in diversity? Do we manage by agenda, or do we learn to rebalance gender? For balanced decision-making includes the feminine and masculine. For one sees models and structures in the academic landscape, the other remodels and restructures the emotional landscape to adapt to change. Is the logo a brand image, or a wedge-tailed eagle with a long tail? For the bundle is the creator of all living and natural things, giving guidance to those in need whenever there is a fearsome time, a time of doubt, uncertainty about how to get off the roundabout, questioning which way to go. For the wind of change is blowing in a renewable direction. Is it the wind power of a renewable future, or the power of business as usual dictating the terms of reference? For the fearsome time is upon us. As standards are poor in the new economic measures, economic indicators plummet without credit. As gross domestic product, GDP, does not produce gross national happiness, GNH. Corruption is the new global deal that oils the wheels of industry. As wars of aggression foster desert storms and Russian roulette, as Chinese checkers become the new game, where many see only black and white, the Chinese New Year is not the dragon, but the dove. It is the year of opposites uniting, advancing team players and leadership. As deep-thinking individuals are finding new ways that no longer exist in schools of thought, awareness cannot be bought by degrees. It can only be sought in reflection and ease, expanding economic concentric waves of a new spiritual era. Expanding those concentric waves of a new spiritual era. The economic paradigm is a prisoner's dilemma that sees a game in theory, yet humanity is the end game when seen. The dilemma is whether to state the truth or remain silent. The highest truth is to know thyself and to thine own self be true. As the ruse is the silence of the lambs in collusion, keeping the game going at a bearish rate. Yet the end game is approaching. The economic paradigm imprisons freedom of speech and truth, for one is paid to work, not participate in an agora of shared interests. Yet a true democracy represents the people, inspiring collaboration. An economic oligarchy represents special interest demanding yields. Yet industrial averages are diminishing returns in the longer term. As diminishing topsoil is the fool's gold that yields deserts and droughts. For climate change is real without doubt. A silent seal yields inclement weather, raising temperatures and tempers worldwide, as triple bottom line tipping points catalyse the domino effect. Subject to gravity. To realise chaos is not subject to control. So, my friends, a brave new world or a braver world looking in the pond of deeper reflection. For what we see in this world is a reflection of ourselves. Please remember the Philosopher's Stone is not the statue of liberty, unmoved by change. It is the liberty to change what appears set in stone. I'll just turn the page. For poetry is the philosophy of art, accessing truth from a kaleidoscope of perspectives and infinite possibilities. It is the water that naturally flows around stone. For art is not idle musings or amusing to be idle. It is the mustard seed of great wisdom and higher knowledge, inspiring the kernel of new ideas that can move mountains without fear or favour. For anyone can remove art as a degree, to cut out humanity to stem dissent. but you can never silence degrees of freedom. For artists were never contained by fortune or fame. They are the torch bearers, carrying the eternal flame, shining the light of truth on the future we will create, chiseling the words on all intellectual walls. It is never too late to change. Change is inevitable. So be the change you wish to see. The truth will always set you free, is how I finished it. And I just noticed I have that there. I sent this poetry to a group of men and no response, but that's okay. I'm pretty accustomed to that these days. I've written to a lot of people and I get nowhere. So that's okay. I'm going to turn this light off because I feel inspired to allow the pulsing of the lights behind me. I feel a mirror in the smart meter because it pulses every few seconds and it's monitoring everything here in the house, which again I don't agree to. I don't believe it's about keeping an eye on power at all, because we could be utilising solar panels. If we were living out in decentralised cities, you wouldn't be using as much power in any case. If we had communities, work could be generated in those areas because people know each other. I actually think we need very small population centres. We need clusters all over the place, but spread out by space and with a lot of space around people. The big cities, the mega cities, are actually really poor quality standards of life because you're crowded in, you're competing for things, prices go up because there's a lot of demand, and that's the idea behind the point of cities. It's about trade is what cities are about. And surrounding people with opportunities to spend all the time, so people's real disposable income falls as they're constantly bombarded with advertising, as people are constantly trying to get them to buy something. And this, of course, works at odds with the environmental situation, where there are tipping points on the planet that we're traversing because of really greed. I was reading something today which is saying that's the core problem, and I know it is. I've known it for a long time, that the greed is the problem. So what is this greed? It's like a hunger. It's a hunger for more and more because one is not enough. And it doesn't matter what economic status you're at. People can be greedy when they're poor because they've not had enough, and they might gorge on food when they get it because they don't know when they're going to get it again. Or they could be extremely wealthy and they're living in a standard of living that they feel is connected to their identity, where they need to have the big house, the nice car, the jet. This is the plane, the Learjet, the butlers. They need to present to the world that they are success and power. So they're not keen to give up any of this, because if they give it up, they lose their sense of self, and that's the fear behind it. But the greed behind all of that is wanting more and more. It's like an addiction, and all addictions are coming from a lack of connection with the inner self. I have a very strong inner connection to life, to what I call infinite intelligence. I can live easily in poverty. For me, it's not poverty in truth, because I don't actually want much. I'm not a greedy person. For me, the great luxuries in life now are going for coffee and maybe a cake. The great luxury for me is shelter. I did a road trip with a friend over the last 2 days, had a fantastic time. We actually socialised with friends of hers. I haven't been out socialising for years because I've been in poverty. And I have to say, there is a loss in that for me, because I don't have a partner. I don't get invited anywhere. No dinner parties. I haven't had dinner parties with couples since I was in a coupled relationship, which was a very long time ago now, because of the social conventions around it. It's like people don't want a third person, or they think you're after their husband, or, there'll be something trivial around that. So when you're on your own like I am, it's a whole different world. I can't buy food the same as everyone else. I have to buy the cheapest, or it has to be donated to me because I can't afford to buy it now. I'm not on welfare, and I own nothing. So I can't cash in assets. I can't access superannuation because the government won't give it to me, even under hardship. So I have to learn to live where need equals want. And is that such a terrible thing? Well, no, it's not, because of the environment. Sometimes I think of myself as a little bit ahead of others, in the sense that I am mastering living with whatever life gives me. And if I can be at peace with that, which is what I work on, then I'm fully accepting of life as it shows up. I don't feel like a victim, which I'm not. To me, a victim is someone who believes they've got no power. I believe I have power. I have the power to choose. I am working on things that inspire me. So the quality of the work I do, even though it's unpaid, is high quality work because I'm working for humanity. But I'm excluded from this life, most definitely. I can't get in my car and drive on a toll road because I don't have the money for it. I can't pay parking because I don't have the money. Can't go to a restaurant. I can't pay upfront fees for anything. If I get a speeding fine, I can't pay it because I can't do a payment plan because I'm not on an income. I can't pay for medical. I don't have a concession card, so I don't get bulk billed. So it means I'm totally excluded from healthcare in the position I'm in. And this is all because I refuse to comply. So I was reading about Future Ready, this whole Future Ready proposition, where it's a smart city, everybody's interconnected, you do all your transactions online. Well, I don't have a credit card, so I don't do my transactions online. My friend has to do it for me now. I can't afford to get my car fixed. If I pay rego, it's only because I've had luck and money has come to me through miracles. It's not because I've got money stashed away. I haven't. Someone would have to just give it to me. And because I'm living out a life of I don't ask for things now, not that I did before, in actual fact, I've always been independent, but I do have rules around my own life, which is I'm not asking for anything. And it's a good thing that I don't, because I've already had judgment levelled at me along the lines, of when my mother did give me a little bit of income. This is food-based income we're talking, absolute necessities, so I don't starve. There's, been thought around that of somehow I should be independent, self-reliant and all this, which I am, but I simply don't have money. I've had to go through trauma over a decade in respect of conflicts that I've had, and I'm a very stable, together person myself. But because I've chosen not to just comply with what I felt was wrong, it's put me through enormous duress and stress, and even to the point of suicide. So what I'm saying is my predicament arose out of my decision that, firstly, I was equal. Secondly, that I have a right to responses. Thirdly, I felt mediation was a solution when there's misunderstanding, but I found that I was confronted with mindsets that didn't accord me any rights. And as a result of that, I've spoken the truth as I've seen it, utilising my education, which is in economics and marketing. And I haven't been accorded what I would call respect, definitely. And I've been given, as most people know, whenever you write to government or what have you, you get standard letters. No one really addresses the grievance or the problem because they're not trained in conflict resolution, and there is an indifference to really sitting down and, working with someone on an equal footing. Doesn't happen. So going back to my poem, I might just refer to a few things, because the future ready is what they're bandying around right now. And I know it came out of the United States because I did some research and found out that there were executive orders for online education. It started off as vocational, but now it's going into the schools and early childhood, which I find quite concerning. And the reason I do is because I see technology as a massive disconnect. And, even to the extent of when you're driving in your car, you're disconnecting from your environment. When you're watching television, you disconnect from the people around you. If you're filming or, you've got cameras going, you're not feeling the people around you because you're not in front of them. So there is a disconnect in respect of a consequence. And this is what I find is really the core issue with the computer science, is what I'm going to call it. It's certainly not technology in the sense of your 1980s technologies that went into manufacturing, even though I would say there's disconnect there too. I've worked in factories as well. Where I've definitely perceived, I'm a little bit tired tonight, so excuse me. I've definitely perceived the disconnect in automated environments where the human is seen as an appendage to that mechanical machine. These technologies were meant to augment productivity, but the humans became componentry within that production. And we definitely saw that in manufacturing. The IT stuff is really an extension of that objectivisation of the human condition. And I see it as the same problem manifesting in another industry, which is further disconnecting human beings from one another, and misunderstandings grow through that. So rather than it being the mainstay of economic growth, which provides stability and trickle-down effects, etc., it becomes a further disconnect. It becomes a replacement of labour, therefore people lose jobs. This then means less money is floating in the domestic economy. If we've got major infrastructure companies coming in, or major multinationals taking over the public sector, which is funded by taxation, those profits go back overseas because they're not being spent. They might be marginally spent in the country, but predominantly the money goes offshore. And then this becomes a contraction of the economy. As people become poorer in that economy, as the middle class becomes impoverished, which is a major issue for any economy, it means that the multiple propensity to consume falls. It means local business suffers because people are not spending locally. They're spending a lot less because they're out of work, and it's a major drop in income when you're out of work. So people become unable to pay their rent. They have to move. They become homeless. They couch surf. There's even more anxiety and discord around that. So you can see there's a spiralling downward of the human condition in amongst all of this. And then we've got, arguments about population around the world where they think it should be smaller. We've got wars still playing out on the planet 2019. Still this belief in might is right. Still a refusal to embrace peace building, cultures of peace, UNESCO's really good programming, which it had, which was UNESCO is United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organisation. They talked about world peace. They talked about a culture of peace. Many countries backed off from that because they don't want to engage to really build peace in the world. And this is what the real problem is. And it's because of the greed that sort of contrasts up against cultures of peace, which is really about developing the people. It's really about, understanding cross-culturally. It's really about young people connecting with other young people around the world. It's about projects that are shared. It's about values. It's about non-violence. But this becomes a threat to those who have vested interests in violence, those who want control, those who want the people disempowered. This is our problem that we're facing. Now, are we ready for that sort of future? Where it's still about money. We haven't shifted the paradigm, which is what everyone is crying out for. They want change, but they don't want change where they all lose work. They don't want change where people are getting sick and dying. They don't want more wars, where all their money is being invested in warfare to the tune of $1 trillion per year. $1 trillion. The United States makes up 80 to 90% of that in its spending. Is that not counterproductive? Is that not sending signals that war is the way we solve problems? Is that not creating an opportunity cost where we're paying way too much for violence when we could be redirecting a lot of that money into addressing education, creating gender parity, enabling people to grow their own food, investing in climates of change which rebalance human activity with climate, with ecology. There's so much that could be done to help others in the world who are struggling in severe poverty. When you have something like, the 85 richest people in the world consuming 50 to 80% of the world's resources, this is ridiculous. We're talking serious concentrations of power here, which is unhealthy, and it creates an imbalance. Now, I've been talking a lot lately about peace as balance, and I mean it. Peace is homeostasis, which is the mirror image of earth balance. Sustainability, if you like, even though sustainability it's not completely accurate, but it's at least giving us a sense of the way that we consume so that the next generation is not diminished through our excess consumption, which is what has been happening. We're also using way too much energy. We've got energy in the United States linked up with defence. This is not a good marriage. So what do we continue to have these conflicts in order to access energy when we could be working on more solar power, more wind power, alternative energy, self-reliance, which some articulate is what they like to see happen. We have to start to talk more about zero-point energy, free energy of Tesla's creation. Nikola Tesla created free energy. He was not in the money business. He was inspired, and he was the one that actually developed Wi-Fi, wireless technology. He was the one that was exploring with ionizing radiation. He was the one who had created AC, alternating current, I believe. I have to check that one out, but I think that's true. It was AC, DC, direct current and alternating current. This is at the time of Edison, the US scientist. And then we had the industrialists involved in all of this, such as the JP Morgans, who are still around today. But the early creators of this were very much into metering power. And are we ready for that future still? Are we still going to continue on with the metering? Can the industrialists let go of self-interest? This is what the real question is of this time. Can you let go of it? Can you usher in the free energy that was always sitting there? Why do you think that economics and profit is so essential? to your own happiness? What if you can be extremely happy by sharing with the world the technologies that it actually needs in order to come back to a homeostasis with the planet so we all get to survive? Because for us, it really is about this. It's about whether we're going to survive or not. And we're in the hands of people who are not caring about us. And that's another huge issue alongside greed, is the lack of caring. We've also got systems that have been compiled by patriarchy. The feminine has been pretty much left to the side. So the balancing, even in nature, in respect of the genders being balanced. We're not meant to be the same. You might say, oh, she's illogical. Well, we might say you're not very empathetic. But together we can be both. It's not about competing with each other. It's about complementing one another. There's so much misunderstanding between men and women, and this sort of putting down of people if they're not displaying a similar way of thinking to you. We're not meant to be the same. We're meant to be different. That's how the homeostasis in the planet sustains. But when you create ideologies around inferiority and superiority, you're instantly creating an imbalance with nature. Nature is not sitting there in judgment of other parts of nature. It's not saying that this part of nature is superior to that part of nature. All it does is rebalance in order to get that homeostasis balance right. It's constantly rebalancing. There's no discrimination whatsoever. It's only what works that really matters in an ecological system. But we people are so out of touch with the true nature and how it works and why it works that we are in continual confusion as we keep trying to compete to recycle. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The recycling is not going to create sustainability. Turning lights off when people aren't using them is not going to save the planet. Dimming is not going to do it. Monitoring through smart meters has been the argument. I don't believe that's the purpose of smart meters, but let's just say for the argument's sake that the whole point is to save power. Well, the power prices have gone up under competitive mechanisms. They were cheaper actually when the government supplied it. And the government also can take into account economies of scale, can take into account inefficient distribution out to regional and remote areas that would not be cost effective for a private company. Cross-subsidisation handles that. This is why government was tasked with collecting taxation on behalf of its people. But when this becomes a private sector initiative where all they are thinking of is shareholder value, where they are thinking of their own careers, where they are creating fanciful notions of futures without it being balanced or grounded by others because they've got the money, this is another form of imbalance with nature. The lights flashing behind me are good actually, because I don't usually put them on, but in a way they're good because it shows a waste of power. I'm going to turn the light off so you can have a little bit of a look at it. I was just looking over my poem too to see if there's anything I really want to say about this. I think essentially what I'm saying is a brave new world coming. Actually, it's not coming, it's here. And I don't necessarily think that's going to serve us. But let me turn this light off and we'll see what comes. I think I might just go still. With my videos, I'm getting more and more relaxed with them in the sense that I'm not really trying to inspire anyone with this anymore. It's like I'm just going to say what I think with sensitivity, because I know there are mindsets out there that see anything that counters their viewpoint as somehow threatening. My work is not about being threatening to them. It's because I'm concerned that we may not survive if we continue along this trajectory. So the motivation for my poetry, my public speaking, my reports that I've written over many years, my interest in human rights is coming from a space of true peace, that we learn how to live in harmony with one another, because that's important to me. So I'm just going to sit with the lighting in the background. So you could look at them as little pockets of energy. You can see an aura forming around my head. You call that an electromagnetic field. What you're seeing is that me as the human being is connected to the energy here. If we were doing some sort of thermal mapping, that green around those lights could be considered to be heat. We could just imagine that as heat. You could also see it as synapses. Synapses are often, they look like they're radiating from circular organic structures that have tendrils radiating out, north, south, east, west. And those, you have electronic pulses that actually jump the gap to the next neural sort of molecular structure. The brain is full of electrical impulses. Our DNA is unbelievably intelligent. So when we're moving through life, we're being bombarded with electromagnetic energy and pulses. Not just from our own phone, but from phones around us, or if we're sitting on a laptop or on a computer, we're in a soup of electromagnetic frequency. Our thoughts also are a frequency. If I'm thinking very positive thoughts, my frequency is high. If I'm thinking love-based thinking, it's very, very high. If I'm down or depressed, my frequency has dropped. Now, we're living in a world filled with electromagnetic frequency, microwaves. How is that impacting the biology of the body? I sit here and I can't feel anything touching me, but I am absolutely being affected by the energy behind me. We go to nightclubs, we love the flashing lights, we think Christmas is great. But what we're not understanding is it's all coal burning. It's a non-renewable energy. It's not like we're having efficient systems that recycle it. We're not using the natural energy and harmonizing with that. The 0 point energy is the natural energy that's not disrupted by magnetic poles. What do they call them? Diodes, I think they call them, where there is an attempt to meter the flow of electrons, energy. What we want is to harness the energy in an unlimited way that does not create excessive radiation. I believe cancer has been caused by radiation around the world. I think we're living in a very unhealthy environment with electricity and wireless technologies. And I believe that's being held on to because of interests that make money from it, who are not able and unwilling to move into something that's going to be of service to humanity. So this is sort of the tension we're dealing with. How do we turn the power off? How do we stop it? And that's where we come in, I guess, and it's up for us to take responsibility for our own consumption. We're so busy on our treadmills, we're so busy with our dramas, we're so busy watching television with our distractions, we've got so many addictions. We also equally have to take responsibility for the world we're in, because we're creating the demand for it. Future Ready has come out of the complicitness of humanity to it. The disempowerment of people who aren't prepared to speak up and say no, or the impact on those who do. Rather than fostering the true democratic spirit, which is what all Western nations state that they believe in, instead we see dictatorial responses to a freedom of speech to say we don't think this is good enough, or we think there's a problem with this, or we see corruption in that, or we believe this is not in the public interest. These are very good things to do, is to be a good citizen in a society, because a citizen cares about other people. This is what creates the very nation state that people say they identify with, and the values that go with that. A fair go, equality, certainly in Australia. Yet we're not walking the talk. We get caught up in our own worlds, we become selfish, we're too busy for people, we don't know our neighbours, we don't speak up when we know something's wrong, we just go, oh, let it go, I haven't got a voice. Well, that's not true, you do. That's denial. You'd be amazed that when you speak up, how it does actually make an impact. If you know your community, you can all speak up together, but in a way that's positive, with solutions at hand as well to assist. And if governments are truly in the spirit of representing people, then they should be open to that discourse, not sitting in the background trying to work out ways to get what they want without public involvement. That's not representing the people, that's representing yourselves or groups, other groups. The lack of trust is what breaks it all down. So there's a lot of responsibility on all levels, not only from the corporates but to the government, but to the people themselves. I myself have done a lot. I've written a lot of blogs, and I've produced programs on my website, Worldpeacefull, www.worldpeacefull.com. These were all initiatives that I developed for workplace bullying, for school programs to educate really essentially a culture of peace through conflict resolution and peace education and self-esteem and well-being and humour. My clowning work was about lightening up and being happy, because I believe that's why we're here. Happiness Australia was really created out of gross national happiness, that idea that what's life unless you're happy, The whole point of economics was to create and produce happiness. So let's go straight to happiness. What is produced out of that? How about we learn how to communicate and dialogue with one another, so that if things aren't good, we can come together and we can problem solve and change those things. And what I would say to those who sabotage or undermine or seek to spin things this way or that or criminalise, I would say what you put out comes back to you. This is not the behaviour of responsible professional people. It's more akin to bullying, thuggery, but it's done in professional narratives that seek to create a verbal expose that they are on the side of right and the other is on the side of wrong, when the truth of the matter is that they aren't engaging in professional conduct, they're not respecting the rights of other human beings, they are seeing themselves above the law. Everybody has to come onto the same playing field here if we're going to create harmony and homeostasis in the planet. Otherwise, we're going to see a huge shift, and I do think that may well happen if people aren't prepared to change. The people are at a point where they want a better world, and I do believe people more and more are going to speak up. I've had conversations and people are saying they're going to have to talk. They're not prepared to accept this fight to the bottom. They're not. They want to get on to solving the problem because they've got children and they want to see a better world for those children. So I do think the circumstances that are coming around all of us today, it's not going to be about future ready. It's going to be about living in the now. It's going to be about taking full responsibility for all of it. It's going to be about truly loving your neighbour, not just making those words sound good. It's going to be about caring about our entire global family. It's going to be about living where we need, where our needs are, not marketing to fake and false wants that only utilise or extract more resources. And I think above all of that, people want to feel happy. And I do believe that when you live in the truth of who you are, happiness is a natural outcome. So with that, I'll say that I've said before, your happy destiny is unavoidable. Live your truth. Truth is not about being right. It's actually it's about being happy. And you know that you're living your truth because naturally you feel happy. So truth is not about winning the argument. It's about integrity. It's about speaking up. It's about compassion towards others and empathy. And it's about being who you really are and not pretending you're something that you're not. Because everybody on this planet is acceptable as they are. In my world, anyway. So, we are moving into a fearsome time, but I do believe we're going to emerge into a far, far better world as we all participate in that change. So with that, I send you love, peace, and true happiness, flowering the values of humanity. Thanks, bye.